Why do you play Dungeons and Dragons? Please respond to the screen. That's a great reason. And we're very glad that you were willing to share that with us. But what we found is something from a magazine called Different Worlds.
Different Worlds magazine.
The magazine of adventure role-playing games, which, as you know, if you've been here before, and if you've ever watched our videos, we love that kind of stuff. Yeah. Magazines, we love adventure role-playing games. So this is the place to be. But what we're going to talk about today is an article written when? When was this written?
This was written, this appeared in the October-November 1980 edition of Different Worlds magazine.
It's 43 years ago.
Different Worlds it was published by Chaosium.
Chaosium? Really?
Yeah.
Look at that. And what they talked about in this article that we're going to be discussing today is kind of why you play the game, why different people play the game. So what they've done is they've broken it down into 4 play styles, essentially, of how people play different games. And that kind of ties back into why they do it, what the experience they want out of it is.
And even though this is 40 some odd years old,
42 and a half.
42 and a half years old, it was written by a man by the name of Glenn, either Blakow or Blackow. I'm not sure which.
Might be Blatchow.
Could be.
I don't know. But Glenn.
Anyway, even though this was written 40 odd years ago, when I read this just a few days ago, it really rang true with all of the play styles that I still see in role-playing games in general, not just D&D, but role-playing games in general today. And so that's why I really wanted to mention this, just to give you guys some food for thought to see, after I read these off, maybe this will be something that you might want to reflect on to see what style of game you play. And who knows, might influence you to play, perhaps add other elements of the other play styles into the way that you play your game.
Yeah. So we're just going to go through these.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
So this game, or this article was called Role-Playing Styles. It's under the Role-Playing Styles heading, and the title of the article is called Aspects of Adventure Gaming, again by Glenn Blachow. However, Glenn, if you're out there, Glenn, I'd love to.
We'd love to hear from you. No success with when we say that yet, though.
Right.
Really.
Nobody, because when being your niche internet micro celebrities, you get like six people who hear you, and so it doesn't happen. But anyway, he goes on to say in the course of this article, what are the 4 aspects of adventure gaming? They are power gaming, role playing, wargaming, and storytelling. And he goes on to say, every game contains these aspects in at least a rudimentary degree, and the feeling of any given world is determined by the interaction of those 4 elements. And I agree with that completely. Mm-hmm. But there are a large number of universes where development has overwhelmingly concentrated on a single one of these facets. Much light on the question of ill will within the hobby can be shed by first considering games with just a single major emphasis, so let's talk about that. And again, I tend to agree largely with the way that this was designed or laid out 40 years ago. But
I think he's right.
It could be because that's what I learned how to play. It was 40 years ago, and that was what was prevalent in the hobby at the time. Mm-hmm. The first one, though, he talks about is power gaming.
Yeah.
Let me read. This is how most fantasy role-playing games start out, power gaming, and is by far the most common form. It's where the 20th level wizard, the 13-13-13 split fighter mage cleric, it's where they most often come from. They will often have a Mace of Cuthbert, or they will be wielding Stormbringer, the One Ring, and other mighty artifacts. These will often appear on the equipment lists of player characters who hail from them, in other words, power gaming styles, usually to the distress of GMs who follow other schools of playing style. So the purpose of this game is neither role-playing, which we will get to, and role-playing is probably used in a different way here than what you're used to, but the purpose of power gaming is neither role-playing nor the development of skills. Instead, the main drive of the player is power. Levels, magic, special abilities, divine favor, and other sources of individual strength are all that is important. The personality of the typical player is that of the player themselves. So let me say that again. The personality of the typical character is that of the player. decked out with labels such as class and alignment. A typical exchange in some games of games of this sort might sound like this. I'm going to run my 20th level cleric with the +5 plate and shield, the scepter of the Demon Kings, the ring of Arcan, and the ring of spell turning. He's going to be the one who's heading out to confront this. Okay, what's his name? Name? I don't know. We'll call him Jocko. Okay, got it. He's a cleric of what? Huh? Oh, I never really thought of what god he follows, but he's lawful good. There's very little emphasis on anything other than my character is this powerful.
Yeah.
That's all there is.
Yeah.
It's usually the amount of power available that determines the outcome of battles in this type of play. And an inadequate supply of it can be disastrous to the players because they have to rely on magic and heavy weapons and such in order to confront any given task. Given this and the way the games of this sort operate, there's an abundance of magic to be expected in that campaign. Power gaming causes much competition among the players, winning being possible by the accumulation of magic and other means of power. So it's really more of it doesn't have to be, but it can often lead to inter-player competition. And I've seen this on more than one occasion.
Yeah.
You don't want so-and-so to get the sword. You and the other players try and figure out a strategy to get to the treasure chest before anybody else can get there, even though logically it doesn't make a lot of sense for you to be doing that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the first one. Power gaming.
There is something to be said for some aspects of this. You want your players to be powerful and you want them to have cool things that they can do, but going perhaps too far down that route takes away from some of the other aspects of gaming and other things that you can enjoy.
Right. It's very narrow focused.
Yes.
And in terms of a GM developing a really in-depth story for people who are only involved in power gaming, there's no reason to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second one that he lists here, role-playing.
Not what you might think.
And this is a slightly different definition from what you might be thinking. Within the pure role-playing campaign, the most important element is the player character and his or her life. The personalities of the characters are worked out in loving detail, and favorite characters tend to have great emotional investments made in them. Their owners do not hold the lives of these beings to be cheap. Characters tend to act within the personalities accorded to them and by the beliefs they're supposed to hold, which is great. And the players speak in persona. I've been known to do that from time to time.
Aye. And if that video hasn't come out yet, this doesn't make much sense.
That's a very good point.
Laddie.
We filmed a thing about Pirate Borg, and I speak like this when I play it.
Nar.
Okay, in a game of this sort, the world is just a stage on which the characters live out their lives, with the spotlight directed at them. They suffer, they triumph, they have loves, hates, and sorrows, and in some ways, they are as alive as the players who created them. As might be expected, the above tends to influence the structure of the game. Given the emotional attachment of the player to his characters, a high casualty rate is downright counterproductive. The players will withdraw the precious lives from the game to a place of safety often. As a result, the GM tends to exercise a considerable amount of discretion with regard to the player characters, utilizing methods such as soft keying. In other words, willingness to adjust the opposition's strength after the fighting has started so that the party won't be overmatched, and subtly trying to warn off the expedition if they're approaching something they can't handle. Which is really kind of the antithesis of the way we play the game.
Yeah, that's very different from the way we go about things. But there are positives to this.
There are positives to this, to having elements of this,
yes.
I believe,
yes.
in your playing style.
We encourage players to lean into their characters of who their characters are and how they got to this point in their existence and their positives, their negatives, everything about them, because it makes for a more well-rounded, genuine experience for all the players.
I agree, 100%. That is very, very true.
Yes.
The third style is the wargaming style, and this kind of harkens back to the time period when war games were being played on a regular basis. Not so much anymore, but anyway, the basic premise of the wargaming style still holds true today. In the wargaming style, one might say that the emphasis is almost the reverse of the role-playing oriented game. The most important facets of the wargaming type of game are the tactical abilities of the players and the game master and the exact mechanics/rules of play. There is a strong tendency toward a relatively low level of magic here, both in quantity and quality, since it is upsetting to the GM to have a tactically brilliant setup destroyed when a character pulls out some cool gadget. And I'm going to say that this is probably not true anymore. I think that you can still have the wargaming style, but there is a lot of magic available.
Yeah.
But players are going to be using the rules to manipulate those magic items
In a very calculated way.
in a very calculated way. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. When they go up, when they perceive themselves to be going up against the dungeon master. Wargaming fantasy role-playing is a competition between the players as a group and the GM in which they match wits and skills. Game master sets up a tactical problem, which then the players have to solve for their experience and treasure, that's part of the game.
Yeah.
But it can be carried too far. Know-how is all important, and detailed knowledge of the rules is a vast help. Okay, that's where we fall out with that.
Yeah.
But I've had players who have vast knowledge of the rules, who have thrown the rules up in my face and said, I should have been able to kill this creature because it says this in the monster manual. No.
It matters not.
Matters not a bit.
Yeah.
Since there is a fine edge of danger in the game, developing a character's personality may result in it doing things dysfunctional to survival, and I think this is important. Hence, the role-playing aspect of the pure wargaming approach is often minimal. In other words, if you have an intelligence of 5 in your fighter, you're not going to play that intelligence of 5 in your fighter in a wargaming style because it's going to be detrimental to what you're doing, so you just kind of gloss over that.
Yeah.
Now, unlike role-playing based games, killing player characters is an integral and logical part of a wargaming game. In fact, many GMs of this school set themselves a desired kill ratio and try to meet it. I've killed a lot of characters. I've never set a ratio for
Yeah, that's pretty harsh.
off.
That one's tough.
Anyway, that is a summary of the wargaming style.
Very rules-oriented, very dangerous, with very little role-playing.
And been very competitive between players and Dungeon Master. And it's not that the Dungeon Master is looking to win, it's just the Dungeon Master will set up something for the players to overcome, which is more, it's just tactically based.
Yeah, they are the opposition instead of helping to
Just tell a story.
further the story.
Storytelling aspect. So, Section 5, storytelling. Section 4, storytelling. In the most general sense of the term, any successful fantasy role-playing game requires some storytelling ability. There are few players who will abide a DM who is so inept that they can't figure out what's going on most of the time, or whose tale limps so badly that suspension of disbelief is impossible. You're over here making faces. He's making faces at me.
I'm not making faces. Am I? Comment down below if I'm making faces.
Too late, I'm looking at you. However, the term as used here means something beyond this basic approach. All of the game types mentioned above have background of some sort. The GM may be content with the basic gilded hole with attached false front town, or he might indulge in the splendid pageantry of empire, complete with ruling dynasty, elaborate history, and detailed geography. Yeah. Regardless of the extent of the universe, however, in most games it's just stage setting. Unless the player characters walk into a scene, the non-player characters there remain frozen and inactive, just stringless puppets. In the storytelling world...
Well phrased.
Thank you. Well, you just need to send him a note.
Yeah.
Because that is actually well
phrased.
Yeah. In the storytelling world, the non-player characters are alive off stage, and that's something I strongly believe. I've believed this since the first time I played this game. In the storytelling world, the non-player characters are alive off stage. History is a continuing and a developing process, with the actions of both player and non-player characters affecting the course of events. Moreover, the GM has usually a very good idea of how the general trend of events is going, also of how the actions of the adventurers can affect what's happening. Now, the pure form of storytelling game is rare, and every campaign emphasizing it is unique. The details of what's going on depend entirely on what story the GM is telling. A role player encountering such a game, in other words, somebody who plays in the role-playing school, a role player encountering such a game for the first time will usually find it a trifle odd, for unlike the heavily role-playing game, the player characters are not at the center of the stage. They are not the element about which events revolve. The player characters can only act within the tale and their freedom is sometimes rather limited. The amount of freedom in this situation can vary enormously. In some games of this kind, there is a distinct impression that the GM has already determined the entire future of the universe and that the player characters are just improvising the script. That's not. I don't think that's a good way to go. In most free-form versions of this game type, the flow of the story and the form of the script are decided by interaction between the GM's general outline of events and the actions of individuals within the campaign. What do you think?
I think that this is really the one that we play.
I think for the most part,
primarily, there are aspects of all of them in the games that we play, but I think that, again, for any of you who have watched any of our videos before, the storytelling aspect of what we're doing is the most important part. We very much enjoy high fantasy outside of D&D, and we kind of want those adventures to continue into D&D.
Yeah.
That's what we want to participate in and kind of emulate in what we're doing. So none of the I've never played a character even close in any of the campaigns that I've been in that has been the most important person in the world or who has been the primary focus of what's going on.
Right.
But we've always, well, not always, but we've often still found ways to affect what's going on.
Without doubt.
From our kind of limited stature within the importance of the world. So we can make an effect on things, but it's not, the cameras aren't on us. We're the side characters that they come back to in the third storyline of the book or the movie, not the main ones.
But I think that those side characters play an important role.
Yeah.
In getting the story accomplished.
Without a doubt.
And I think I think you're exactly right, but I think that we do have some elements of the wargaming style in that the players, I set up obstacles for the players to overcome. They have to work together and come up with a plan to overcome it.
Yeah.
So that is very often an important part, but it's a much smaller part than the storytelling. The role-playing aspect, we do have elements of that as well.
A lot of the positive aspects of that we have.
Right.
Yeah.
The negative aspects where, the game is just set up to allow the players to indulge
the story they want to tell exclusively.
Right.
Yeah.
This is, they are, like it said in the article, and I thought that was really well written. In the storytelling aspect, in the storytelling style, they are the main characters on the stage.
Yeah.
Is that
no? The role playing.
I'm sorry. Role playing style. They are the center. They are the focus on the center of the stage.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that that's the best way to move a story along. Not to say that they can't be. I've had a number of characters over the years who have ended up on the center of the stage, but they had to work to get there, and they had to plan to get there, and they had to, most important for me, they had to play well to get there.
And we've had characters who, like you said, for moments have been on the main stage. But, Faramir isn't on the main stage of Lord of the Rings for the vast majority of the story. But he does show up at a really important and very critical time to play a very important role.
Right.
But after that,
goes back into...
Yes. So that's kind of how we view it. None of us are Gandalf, necessarily. But we do play a lot of the not less important, but less front and center characters.
The less focused on characters.
Yeah, and that's just how we like to play.
But that's how we play. But anyway, I don't want to belabor how we play. I'd really like to know what you guys.
Yeah.
What elements of those four playing styles do you use? If you use one, I'd be curious to know, why you use that particular style. Is that just because of the personality types of the people that you play with, which is fine?
Yeah.
Or do you use elements of each, or do you use elements of two? Let us know about that, because I think that this is an interesting question that you don't really think about.
No.
Until you sit down and are confronted with someone who's outlined what those playing styles are. And I do think that these are primarily the playing styles.
And I was going to say, if you can think of another one,
tell us
what it might be, because I think this pretty much covers my experiences with role-playing games. So if you have another one that you think is, that you have a lot of experience with, let us know down below. Yeah. It's like there's only, 11 types of stories that are told in the world, something like that. Figure out the 12th, you get a prize. You won't get a prize from us.
You'll get a recognition on one of our videos.
Yeah, we'll like your comment.
There'll be like 8 other people who will say, but yeah, I just thought this would be interesting. Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Let us know if you disagree with us. But that's what I have for this particular video. Just some food for thought.
Yeah, things to think about the inner machinations of Dungeons and Dragons and how it works.
You're trying to use all kinds of fancy language because this guy used fancy language, huh?
Yeah, inspired me.
Well, it's good. It's a good thing.
Thanks for watching.
I'm Jim.
I'm Alex.
Keep your sword on free.
Toodaloo now.